training. Thank you all for taking time to join us for today's training. And I would like to take a moment to introduce who I am. My name is Lynn Griffin. I am a bachelor's level as well as master level social worker, graduated from IUPUI here in Indianapolis, and I have many years experience working in both community setting as well as the clinical setting, and have also worked in family preservation, mental health, and also worked with substance abuse individuals and have worked with systemic changes for improving services within our state of Indiana. I am a um, qualified mental health clinician, and also I am the administrative director of Elevations Training and Consulting. And I am happy to take some time today to discuss the recovery model with you. As we go through today's training, I want to point out that there are many references that we have relied upon to create the training today, making sure that you have the latest and the greatest information that's out there regarding recovery models and some of the resources that are available to you. We have referenced on this page, and you can always feel free to take a deeper dive into some of the information that's been shared by looking at some of our references that are available to you. So let's first jump in and talk about some of our learning objectives for today. So we hope that today you will be able to define recovery. Also, we want to make sure that we focus on the importance of recovery and some of the components of recovery. And then last, we want to make sure that we are going to identify models for recovery. So let's start off with the definition of recovery. Of course, you can imagine there's more than one definition of recovery, and depending on the setting and environment, that definition may be a little bit more strategic, or it may be a little bit more encompassing and broader. But from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, it defines recovery from addiction as a process of change through which people improve their health and wellness, live self-directed lives, and strive to reach their full potential. And I like to always take a moment with this definition to point out some key words here. One is self-directed lives. So with recovery, we're helping those individuals with the resources and giving them the skill set that they need, that as they move forward in their self-directed lives, that they'll be able to sustain all that they need to sustain in order to live a life that has been successful in recovery, because that is an ongoing process. So another definition comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. And it says that they provide a definition. It says that recovery is inclusive of both substance abuse and mental health. Now, what's key about this definition that is inclusive of the mental health piece? So we just don't recover from a substance, but we also recover mentally, which also can entail some emotional recovery for us as well. So those are some of the key words with the SAMHSA definition, and making sure that we understand that that focuses on both substance abuse and the mental health component. And as we move through this training, you'll see how those two tie into each other. So talking about SAMHSA, which is a Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, their working definition is a process of change through which individuals improve their health and wellness, live a self-directed life, and strive to reach their full potential, and also takes on these many different 10 guiding principles of recovery. You can see here that some of those principles involve hope, and they're person-driven. It's holistic, peer support, involves cultural and respect. And we'll take a deeper dive into those some of those guiding principles a little later on in this training. So what is the significance of recovery. Why are we doing recovery? What's so important about recovery? Well, there's many, many different reasons that recovery is so important. So the first thing is that recovery inspires hope and encourages resilience among individuals who are going through recovery, giving them and empowering them with the abilities and resources to be able to help themselves identify the areas in which they need to grow, and then providing them with that motivation and that encouragement drives hope for them. And so it's really important that we are looking at how we can inspire hope and encourage those individuals. Also, the importance of recovery services is that it's an integral role in managing behavioral and substance abuse addictions because it can provide a reduction in relapse rates by offering evidence-based approaches such as counseling and support groups. So when we say evidence-based, we're looking at some of those key models that we'll talk about later on in this training that provide us with some techniques for treatment. And some of those techniques include counseling and support groups. And those are important because we're beginning to, again, provide that individual with hope and encourage them, as we talked about in our first um, bullet point here about the importance of recovery. The second thing is that recovery also provides community and social supports through invaluable peer support that provides understanding and belongingness. For those of you that are currently working with individuals in recovery or those who are embarking upon this journey of working in recovery, it's really powerful for individuals to have that sense of belongingness. It helps them to feel like they're not alone. Again, and we go back to it, instills hope within them, makes them feel like they're part of something. And that support is very valuable when they're going through the recovery process. So making sure that that peer support is there. It helps them to provide that sense of belongingness, but it helps them also to connect with other individuals, and they begin to see that there's very similar circumstances or that they're not alone in what they're going through. So that's extremely important. Also, recovery provides the ability to strengthen family dynamics that serve beneficial in rebuilding and reinforcing familial bonds. Many times we see where that familial bond has been broken or at least has been a little damaged due to the need for recovery and the substance use. Sometimes it may be the family bond or lack of family bond that has contributed to the substance abuse. So by going through recovery, recovery itself can provide that ability to take a closer look at beginning to fix some of the problems and understand the dynamics and how family plays a very strong role in the recovery process, whether it be support or how it may have been instrumental in creating some of the problems, and how do we begin to heal and work upon some of those dynamics. So, in addition, recovery provides economic stability through assistance with vocational services and reentry to the workforce. So, a great example of that would be, we're working with the individual, they are progressing through recovery, and in order for them to be successful, we're going to have to anticipate what some of their needs may be. And part of that anticipation may be that maybe because of their history of substance abuse, they may be unemployed and in need of a job. And maybe because they don't have a job or the training or skills to get a job, they may be unhoused right now. So, in anticipating what their needs may be, with Recovery Works, we're able to help them in establishing some economic stability and providing them with maybe perhaps vocational training and then some job placement, which will then in turn continue to help them as they go through the recovery process and securing maybe housing or the transportation, just overall economic stability to support them as they go through this journey. So, recovery also provides legal assistance in navigating legal challenges that may be present through the recovery and rehabilitation process. So, for those of you that are currently working with individuals in recovery or have maybe have already taken part in our additional trainings that we have with working with individuals, justice involved individuals, then you know that oftentimes there, unfortunately, is that connection between substance abuse and criminal behavior. So individuals who are in recovery I usually have already been involved with the criminal and justice system, or either they're at a higher risk. And so, as we're working with these individuals, we're able to provide them with some guidance and legal assistance and resources to help navigate some of those challenges. Maybe they're having they have current charges against them. Perhaps they're on probation. So it helps us to be able to be present through that process with them and provide them with the necessary resources as they navigate through the legal system and the challenges that they have. As we continue on, we look at recovery and some of its benefits and what it does. Recovery also provides awareness and raises awareness and education on the risk and dangers of addiction while promoting prevention. So maybe the individual was already in recovery, have been successful, and they relapse. Or maybe the individual is just now, for the first time, experiencing the services of recovery. So, what we can do as individuals who are working with those in recovery, we can kind of raise the awareness of some of the physical dangers, some of the mental health dangers of substance and abuse and addictions, while also giving them some key tools and resources to help them prevent continued use and also support their journey as they're going through recovery. Also, recovery provides support for public health by lowering addiction rates, which reduces healthcare costs. So, it's no secret that, we see it on the news often about how there's been maybe an increase in overdoses in the state of Indiana and how they are really promoting police officers and some of those individuals who are kind of first responders being able to be equipped with necessary necessary resources and tools such as Narcan and different things that can help individuals who are we may be overdosing. But in addition to that, we have a lot of individuals that end up having some medical, physiological conditions and sub conditions that are related to substance abuse. For example, a person who is abusing alcohol over a period of time may end up having cirrhosis of the liver. So with these individuals, we now have higher healthcare costs. So what recovery does and providing treatment and support for these individuals, it helps our community overall and that it reduces some of those rates in the healthcare costs that is taking its toll upon the state of Indiana. So recovery also provides opportunity of preventing co-occurring disorders through comprehensive care that promotes holistic health and well-being. Just alluded to that. If we can focus on prevention, if we can focus on getting the necessary medical treatment as the individual goes through recovery, we're hopefully being able to prevent them from having cirrhosis of the liver or having an overdose or having any related conditions that may be tied to their substance use or abuse. So it also helps with the health and well-being. Again, that physical health, overcoming adverse physical health with medical detoxification, nutritional support, and health assessments. Just having those things go back to the points we just said earlier, how we're helping to reduce some of those rates of healthcare costs or how we're helping to prevent some of those disorders. Well, as you can see by providing the medical detoxation, a person's less likely to have a need for hospitalization because they're going through withdrawal without the proper physiological medical support. So it helps us with the physical health of the individual, but it also helps with the mental health. So addiction and mental health issues often coexist, as we alluded to earlier. And recovery services offers counseling, therapy, and psychiatric support to address mental health concerns and establish psychological well-being. As I shared earlier, oftentimes individuals who are um, involved with substance abuse, they are also involved in the criminal justice system, but we also see that there's many times a a co-disorder there, where a lot of times they have begun to take the substance because they're self-medicating, because they may be having hallucinations or they may be experiencing extreme anxiety or depression and unaware of what's causing these symptoms for them, or that they may have a mental health diagnosis that's undiagnosed and untreated. They begin to self-medicate themselves by the use of substances, as we all know. So with that coexistence of the two, recovery helps us to kind of address the mental health need out there and also helps us to be able to provide those resources such as counseling and psychiatric support to help them as they are going through the recovery process. So we just shared a whole lot of information. I'm going to pause there because I know that was a lot of information, but as you can see, it's recovery is extremely important and very significant because, again, it can help us with our overall costs and burden on society from medical costs and healthcare costs. It can help support the individual, provide them with hope and encouragement. It also can help the individual and get them connected to the resources and tools that they need to be successful. It can help them to diagnose a problem such as mental health that was not maybe something that was diagnosed or that they were aware of. So there's many different benefits. And as we look back over this to the significance of recovery. So, how then do we establish opportunities for recovery services? We know all these wonderful benefits, right? We know the significance of recovery, but how do we establish those opportunities for recovery services? Well, if we look at it, there's recovery-oriented systems of care per se. And what is a recovery-oriented system of care? Well, it is a coordinated network of person-centered, community-based services and supports that utilize and build upon the strengths and resiliencies of individuals, families, and communities to achieve abstinence and improve the health, wellness, and quality of life for individuals who are at risk of alcohol or drug problems. So this basically is pulling from more of a clinical standpoint, it would be an interdisciplinary team. It's pulling resources, individuals, and connecting resources and individuals from that clinical world, from the community, from the family to the individual, connecting all those resources and building upon the strengths and the tools and resources that are available and the expertise and knowledge of each one of those resources and connecting those dots to create a very coordinated network that helps us create this system, this recovery-oriented system of care. And again, it's person-centered and it's also community-based. And I just want to take a moment to point out those two things. It's person-centered because we're looking at the needs of that individual and we're anticipating the needs of that individual. And it's also community-based because we're making sure that we are connecting that individual to the daily activities and the daily connections that they would have within their community. So it is not necessarily a therapy that we're doing. It's not necessarily a magic wand that we have. Instead, we're looking at the needs of that person, anticipating the needs of that person, pulling from the community where that person is going to live, eat, work, play, pray, be involved on a daily basis. And we are pulling all of those systems together to create that system of care. So recovery-oriented system of care is the goal of the recovery-oriented system of care is to create a viable infrastructure or system of care with sustainable resources that effectively address the substance use problems within the communities. And it's important here that we look at the word sustainable because we cannot always be that support or be there for that person when they're in crisis, or we may not always be available to that individual. So we need to be able to provide them with the ability to empower themselves to gain the knowledge, the ability, the skill set, the resources, the connections that they need as they move through this process of recovery so that it is sustainable for them throughout their entire life, not just while they're being seen by this particular counselor, not just while they're involved in this particular peer support group. So, sustainable is extremely important. So, what are some of those strategies of recovery of system? Recovery-oriented systems of care. So we have individual autonomy. Again, this is very person-centered. It is about the individual, understanding what the individual needs, understanding how they got there, where they're at now, and where is it that they desire to go. So it is individual autonomy and making sure that that person has the autonomy to be part of that decision-making process, part of that treatment plan, part of their recovery, and us not thinking and deciding for them, but instead allowing them to have that voice and empowering them to use that voice so they can be part of their own recovery process. It's also a focus on individual and not diagnosis. So this is very key again. If you notice this theme here, individual, 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 we don't want to say, okay, well, this person is diagnosed with this particular mental health and this particular substance abuse diagnosis. And now that means that they fit into this algorithm per se of do this, this, and that. And that is just magically going to be okay. No, we need to make sure that we're, again, focusing on that individual because every individual and every individual need is very different and very unique to that particular individual. So there's no cookie cutter approach in recovery because we have to look at that individual, again, person-centered with the individual autonomy, but also understanding that the focus is on that individual. So that is important to always remember when we're looking at some of those strategies of recovery-oriented systems of care. Also, we want to acknowledge and embrace individual differences. Again, it just, said how we need to understand that each individual, what they bring to the table, their circumstances are going to be very unique to them. How they got to where they are at this present time in recovery is something that only they have experienced. Because even though they may have had a similar experience to Jane or John Doe, how they process and interpret emotionally and mentally that same experience is going to be very different than it was for maybe Jane or John Doe. So understanding that there are individual differences and embracing their perspective, how it affected them individually, and moving from that point, looking at again that person and centering on that person. So, in order to do this, how do we begin to do all these wonderful things, right? How do we begin to um, develop this system of care? How do we begin to look at some of those strategies and actually put them into use with the work that we do? So there are components of a successful recovery services, and we're going to take a moment to look at some of these components. So, one, again, person driven, individual guides their recovery and defines personal recovery goals, supporting autonomy. Remember that strategy we just had on the previous slide, talking about individual autonomy. And then also trauma, recognizing addiction may be a coping mechanism to trauma. That goes back to the strategy that we just alluded to about understanding that what they bring to the table, their experiences are unique to them. We don't know until we begin to work with that individual what their traumas may be and how that trauma may have affected them. However, by looking at the person-centered approach and focusing on that individual, as the strategy suggests in the previous slide, we're going to be able to learn to understand a little bit more about that trauma and understand and begin to connect the dots of if their addiction is related to their trauma and was it a mechanism to address the trauma that was going on in their life. Also, another component of recovery is hope. and fostering hope. Another recurring theme that we've heard thus far, individual and hope, right? So fostering hope by identifying manageable and realistic short-term goals. We don't start out approaching the individual saying, okay, your first day here, let's talk about, in 6 months time, you're going to be recovered, you're going to have this job, you're going to do A, B, C, and D. No, we want to begin to identify and work with that individual. Again, going back to those strategies, giving them the autonomy and making sure that they're involved in that process, making sure that they are part of identifying some of their short-term goals. And again, the importance of short-term goals is exactly that. They're short-term. Let's eat the elephant one bite at a time instead of trying to take one giant bite and not be able to accomplish getting that elephant in your mouth all at one time. So we want to make sure that we are fostering that hope by giving them short-term goals so that when they do achieve that goal, they're motivated, they're inspired, and that helps with their determination and fosters that hope within that individual. So respect is another component of recovery. So that's creating a non-judgmental and blameless environment that prevents stigmatism. So there's a lot of stigma in mental health, a lot of stigma in substance abuse. So this is something that individuals have to fight daily as they're going through the recovery process. But making sure that we're providing them with a safe and secure environment to where they don't feel judged by the services they're receiving, that they don't feel judged by the provider of those services can be very powerful because it establishes that rapport and trust and gives that individual a stronger sense of self and begins to wipe away some of that stigma that they may be feeling pressured by on a daily basis. And then also another component of recovery is that it is culturally based. So understanding the value and need for cultural awareness and inclusion within the treatment process. This is extremely important when understanding the culture and also understanding culture is not just a racial and ethnic component, right? Culture can be a regional culture, it can be a religious culture, it can be a gender culture, it can be many different things that actually can be defined within culture. So, making sure that we understand the value of that and the need for that cultural awareness, because we may be working with the individual that, due to maybe cultural understandings or cultural experiences or traditions, they may respond to some of the treatments or not respond to some of the tools and resources that you provide to them because of that cultural barrier. So we need to make sure we're aware of those cultural differences there and understanding the value that culture brings when it comes into recovery, not just recovery, but in anything in life, understanding how culture can impact many nuances in life as well. So looking at additional components, we have the holistic component, and that's considering all factors inclusive of biological, social, and psychological factors. So it's that mental health piece. It is that physical medical piece. It is that community, family interaction, peer interaction, social interaction overall. So that's taking that holistic approach and looking how all of those factors tie into their substance addiction or use of substances. Also, another component is diverse pathways, supporting the individual where they are, the pathway chosen, for example, a medication pathway instead of counseling. So it's again making sure that we're not putting any judgment or stigma on the path of recovery that they choose. For some, it may be that they feel that they're strongest and best and have more success with counseling. And then for others, it may be more of that medication pathway where they have to receive that medical support during their recovery process. But whatever they choose, it's important as a provider and as an individual working with those in recovery that we are not judgmental and that we are not creating a stigma in the environment in which they're seeking help. Another component of recovery is valuing support systems. So, engaging and understanding the impact and value of peers who share and connect via experiences and considered as experts by experience. And this is extremely important. Don't ever devalue the life experience and the lived experience of an individual who has been in the recovery process. The the ability to connect and understand where that individual, another individual is at as they're going through recovery is very powerful and it's very uplifting. It gives us, once we said again, about belongingness, it gives them that sense of belongingness. So they are the experts because this is the life they live. They have the lived experience. And that's something that models, theories, therapists, books cannot always provide. So having that peer who can share and make that connection makes that person feel supported in ways that maybe a particular model or therapy cannot do. So that's extremely important. Another component is establishing a sense of belonging. Again, utilizing and engaging social networks and relationships and connections that offer support during the recovery process, just as we said. So, valuing that support system. So, making sure that there is that sense of belonging for that person. And there may be different ways to make those social connections with all of the technology and ways that we connect socially now through digital means. Sometimes that may be an important way for an individual to connect. It may be reconnecting with that family, going back to some of the significance and importance of recovery, being able to you know address some of those family dynamics that are going on. So it may be relationships and connections that we need to support through the recovery process and just making sure that we understand the value and importance of that. Another component is individual, family, and community strength. So that is embracing a sense of dignity and purpose by utilizing family connections and social roles. So making sure that person understands who they are and where they fit in. And if they feel they don't fit in, helping them to identify and find a place where they do fit in. Maybe they can use some of those expert experiences and share some of their life experiences to help that particular individual who's in recovery, and that gives them a sense of, fulfillment, a purpose that they feel that they have been able to help another person out. Or again, maybe it's just having pride and celebrating some of those short-term goals that they maybe have identified and have succeeded in reaching that goal, celebrating that so that they have, a sense of dignity and pride and embracing that opportunity to celebrate the strength that that individual has. So, looking back, I know we've covered quite a bit. We've covered the significance and the importance of recovery. We've talked about some of the strategies and the components of recovery, but why? Why recovery? If we look at the why for recovery, well, the intent and the purpose of recovery is to address addiction. We want to empower the individual to achieve a life free of substance abuse. We want to reduce economic and social burden that substance abuse places on society. And we want to provide support and resources that address the needs of individuals facing substance abuse. So, this is the meat of why, why the recovery model. Why is it that we're doing all these things? And what's the significance of all these components and the strategies and, all that we've discussed up to this point? Well, here it is. This is all of the benefits basically of recovery. So when we look at the client needs as we go through recovery and we look at some of those client needs, we see that there's a hierarchy of needs when it comes to recovery. And there's 4 dimensions of individual needs that are really important here. One, the health. So living with and adjusting to symptoms and making choices that support physical and emotional well-being. We also have home. stability, and security. Then there's purpose, meaningful engagements, and fulfillment. And finally, we have the fourth dimension, which is community, supportive social and peer networks and relationships that foster love and hope. And we've already kind of touched on each one of these. If you think back onto the previous slides and all the strategies that we talked about and the benefits, we talked about health, helping that person to make some of those better choices, preventing hopefully continued substance abuse and helping raise the awareness so that they have an understanding of how they got to where they're at right now. How do they navigate through where they're at? How do they get to a short-term goal of reaching that, and how they're going to be able to reach this benefit of, having a better physical and emotional well-being overall. And then when we look at home, we talked about, well, they may be unhoused because of substance abuse, or it may be a co-disorder with mental health, and they've used the substance to be able to self-medicate. So now we're looking at, well, we've anticipated the needs, we've been able to identify a diagnosis, or just been able to provide them with the tools, skills, and resources to address their addiction. And now, as we're moving through this recovery, we need to anticipate those needs, right? Like we said earlier. So, here we are, we're looking at home and stability and security, giving them that stability and security and providing them with that home overall for their stability is very important in that recovery process, because that's one less stressor now that they have to worry about. And we talked about purpose again, just making sure that we're giving them meaningful fulfillments, empowering them, focusing on their strengths and celebrating those strengths. And community, again, we talked about having those experts that have had the life experiences, and also connecting them with those peer groups and those support groups, those peer support groups, and why they're important. So looking at those four dimensions of the needs of the individual who's in recovery, look at those dimensions. It's basically the hierarchy of needs for that individual. So how do we get to the pathways to recovery? How do we have the person now that has these needs, and we just identified what those four dimensions are, right? How do we begin to provide and address some of those dimensions? So what are the conduits to recovery? Well, that includes clinical treatment. So that would be your therapies, or it may be the counseling. It could be getting the necessary clinical medical treatment that they need. It could also be medications. Again, we said there's different pathways, right? There's pathways that one includes counseling, and well, the other may include, getting the support through medical or, medications to support them through the recovery process. So, that is another pathway, would be the medications. Another pathway would be academic, family, and peer support. Educating them, giving them the knowledge, connecting them with and fixing all the dynamics that may be present within family or within their support groups, and then providing them with a peer support group that understands where they're at, what they're going through, and can help navigate them as they proceed through their journey with recovery. And then faith-based interventions. There are some individuals that do rely upon maybe a spiritual component or a faith-based intervention. So you'll see oftentimes there's many churches or different faith-based programs that are out there for substance abuse or recovery, or for peer support groups. So some people find that the faith-based intervention is the best pathway for them. So it gives them something that they feel that they are able to not only belong to, but also give them a sense of purpose. So there is the faith-based interventions as well. So recovery systems of care and the delivery of services. As we said, there are many different players. Remember that system of care and creating that network that we talked about to be able to provide all of these services, to be able to have the resources to begin to implement some of the strategies and understanding those dimensions of the individual and their needs. So, who are these players? Well, there's the therapists and our cognitive behavioralists and motivational therapies that are out there to address substance abuse. We have our daily drug and alcohol testing. There's players in that arena who are really instrumental in helping us determine the progress and success of the individual as they're going through recovery. There's schools and colleges giving them additional resources, giving them something to look forward to in the future, or giving them short-term goals that they may want to identify for themselves. So schools and colleges may be one of those. Again, faith-based organizations, some feel that they, go back to their roots or either establish a faith-based connection, which gives them that sense of purpose often. There's also making sure we have a relapse plan. I want to take a moment to talk about this because we can do all these wonderful things, but sometimes people relapse. That's just part of that whole recovery process. It can happen, and more often than not, it probably has happened with the work that you're currently doing. So, making sure that there is an understanding that if there is a relapse, what is our plan? So that when a person, if they should relapse with a plan, there's a sense of security and a sense of hope that we talked about earlier, instead of them relapsing and having a sense of anxiety because they have relapsed. So, making sure that there's a clear, identified relapse plan and that that is discussed so that that person can still feel empowered and have that sense of hope and get back on track should they relapse. There's the cultural groups and recovery activism. Again, being culturally aware, understanding what culture brings to the recovery process for an individual. There's the addiction medicine physicians. They're a player in this whole recovery system of care. The workplace is also a player. And you can see we have social support, sober friends, as well as those peer supports who have those life experiences. It's equally important to have those sober support friends who can model the behavior that they're trying to actually achieve. So that is important. And again, looking at that family support, and sometimes that means family therapy. If we have some dynamics in the family that have contributed to the substance abuse or is not supportive of the recovery process, it may be important for us to mend some of those relationships and address some of those dynamics that are going on with the family. So, the family support sometimes can also mean family therapy. Again, we see residential support here. Once you are sober, you need, whether you're sober or in recovery, you're still going to need that housing and making sure that we are providing that residential support and sober living support. And then, of course, some of the mutual support groups that are out there, like Narcotics Anonymous. So these are some of the players that you see that are all part of that recovery-oriented system of care. And there's a lot of players here, but it takes, again, remember that person-centered and community-based. This would be the perfect combination of person-centered and community-based, because here, when you look at this model and all those players, you see representatives from every area there. So it's extremely important. So, guidelines for recovery services. Now that we have equipped ourselves with the knowledge and understanding of the importance and the dynamics and dimensions and all of the different components of recovery, what are some of our guidelines for recovery? So, recovery oriented best practices. So, let's look at that. We want to acknowledge differences. Always acknowledge the differences. There's going to be difference in age, gender, culture, and beliefs. We also want to understand individuals' situations and experiences as the person is different, as we shared earlier. We also want to consider individual mental health conditions and experiences, including periods of unwellness, but also here again, I cannot stress, some individuals may not even be aware that they have a mental health um, crisis going on, or have a mental health diagnosis. They may not be diagnosed with the mental health condition at the time. And if they are diagnosed with mental health, they may not be currently in treatment or compliant with their treatment. So making sure we're always considering individual mental health conditions and experiences. Also, optimism, very important again, empowering that individual to have a meaningful life, inclusive of positive choices. Key word here, choices, because the choices they've made up to this point may not always been positive, but now we're putting them on the path to making those positive choices, giving them those short-term goals and celebrating some of those strengths and abilities, which then leads to independence, which is always one of the best practices, because if we've done everything right and if we are working cohesively with that individual and giving them autonomy, we're going to reach a point to where that individual will become independent, which is what we're all hoping for, independent and substance free. So looking at some of the models for recovery, which takes into account everything that we've discussed thus far, we have the cognitive behavioral therapy and the motivational enhancement therapy. So, with the cognitive behavioral therapy, it's a form of psychotherapy that emphasizes developing healthy coping skills and changing negative thought patterns to change behaviors. So, we begin to look at this therapy as changing from that negative to positive. The self-talk about how I'm never going to get better, my life is so terrible, and I'm always going to be addicted. I'm not strong enough to beat this addiction. Changing that and giving them different ways to phrase things, different ways to view things, changing the lens through which they see their addiction and themselves, and giving them, replacing that with coping skills in hopes that we're going to change some of that negative behaviors, negative thoughts, negative talk, with giving them positive strengths to focus on by changing some of the way that they think about things and see things. And we do that by providing them with coping skills. So the goal of the cognitive behavioral therapy is to assist the client in becoming aware of problematic, misguided patterns of thinking and utilizing realistic problem-solving techniques, thus increasing confidence in managing stressful situations. Just as we shared, talking about changing the way they think, the way that they perceive things, and replacing them with coping skills that builds that confidence for them to handle some of those stressful situations. Again, going back to hoping to have that independent person who can do this for themselves. So that's the whole point of this therapy, is to usher them through this process of being able to change the way they think and see things. And also, it's managing emotions in a healthy manner, but also facing their fears. So, not turning to a substance, but instead being able to understand, process, and manage what they're feeling, identify what they're feeling, manage it, and go through the process and dealing with their emotions in a healthy, productive manner instead of self-medicating or turning to a substance. So, with motivational enhancement therapy, this is a short-term therapeutic technique which focuses on helping individuals to become motivated to change their harmful and destructive behaviors. Key here is that this is a short-term therapeutic technique. So, with the motivational therapy, we have pre-therapeutic assessments. So, there's some assessment that the individual is going to engage in before they even start this therapy. So, there's 3 phases which can occur over 4 to 6 sessions. Again, remember I said this is a short-term therapy. So, phase 1, motivation for change. It involves reviewing assessments, empathetic listening, reflection, open-ended questions, and determination of the client's willingness to change. So those pre-therapeutic assessments, the therapist will already have reviewed that, and they'll present the individual with some open-ended questions, and they'll be able to empathetically listen because they've already kind of got a feel for maybe what the person thinks or feel because of those pre-assessments. And so they will use those open-ended questions to begin to determine the client's willingness to change, where they're at in this process. What is their motivation for change is what they're looking for. Phase 2 is consolidation change, the development of a therapist and client co-created change plan. Remember early on in this training, we talked about individual autonomy. We talked about person-centered and making sure we're including the person within their treatment process. So phase 2 is just exactly that. It is the development of the therapist and the client creating a plan for change together. And then phase 3 is strategies for follow-through, including the 3 R's. And what are the 3 R's? It's reviewing progress, renewing your motivation, and then redoing commitment. So we want to take time to look back after we get so far, and after we've done so many sessions, we look back and we review the progress that the individuals made, making sure we're focusing on their strengths. We want to renew their motivation, see where they're at, how dedicated are they, reignite that motivation and determination with them to continue to have that progress. And then from there, we want to recommit again. So we want to redo the commitment. And then, of course, there's, the stage 4 where we're going to look at independence overall and establishing the independence with that individual. So, in summary, the value of recovery-oriented systems of care is individualized, personalized care, is successful recovery, is self-determination, is mental health awareness and self-management, and it's improved family dynamics and familial relationships. So, some training takeaways for you is simply said, recovery works. It truly does work. When we look at how we're able to use the life experience of others, connect them with peer support through counseling, models, therapies, medication, build upon the strength, take into account the culture, making sure that we are person-centered and we're looking at individual autonomy, building that independence, giving them that hope and determination. And then as well, while we're doing all this, we're reducing the risk of relapse. We're focusing on the strengths of that individual and providing them with education and knowledge so that they understand what it is they're going through. We're setting those short-term goals and celebrating them throughout the process as they reach these goals. And we're always looking back to renew, recommit their motivation, understand exactly who they are, where they're at, and do that with empathetic listening. So when we take all of that into account and all the models that are there, we clearly see that recovery does work. So with that, please remember that you hold hope and recovery in your hands. And I thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Thank you for your commitment, dedication, and determination to continue to serve those who are in need of recovery and for being on this particular training. And I invite you to continue to be passionate about the work you're doing. And thank you so much for being involved in our training today. Thank you, and I hope that you've enjoyed our training.